Well, welcome anatomy students to another lecture today. We're going to look at nerve tissue. This is our last type of tissues that we're going to examine of our 4 tissue types. Hopefully you've already taken your notes on the muscular tissue. That lecture was about 30 minutes. My goal for this lecture is it's going to take about 15 minutes to get through. So the first thing that I want to talk about is this tissue is going to be a lot simpler than anything we've looked at before because there's only 2 types. And the 2 types of cells that we're going to be talking about, it's one type of tissue, but we're going to look at 2 cells that you're going to be looking at within that tissue. The 2 cells are the neurons, okay, the neurons, and then the neuroglia. Okay, the neurons are going to be our nerve cells, and we will look at the special characteristics of neural cells. And the neuroglia are going to be the cells that help to take care of our neurons, and it literally translates into nerve glue. So the neuroglia are going to be our support cells that help to take care of our neurons, and we will look at the the different types of neuroglia cells. 98% of our neurons are located in the brain and the spinal cord, and these 2 things make up what we call the central nervous system. Okay, and then we have the remaining approximately 2% in the peripheral nervous system, which is going to be all the nerves that exit and enter the brain and the spinal cord. And so those make up the peripheral nervous system, PNS. And we'll learn lots and lots more about the nervous system as we move on. One thing that is really, really special about nerve cells is that they're specialized for conduction of electrical impulses. They're the only cells in the body that can do this. And they do this by, oops, I misspelled. They do this by moving ions across their cell membrane. And so they conduct these electrical impulses from one part of the body to another. So one body region to another. And this is how your body communicates. Your brain will communicate and give instructions out to the rest of your body, and then your body then communicates back to your brain and sends information back. As we move on here, of your neurons, you have 3 different ones based upon which direction they go. Okay, so sensory neurons are going to go from the periphery, the peripheral nervous system, to the central nervous system. Motor neurons are going to carry information from the central nervous system on out to the peripheral. And interneurons are just within the central nervous system, communicating within that system. We have different types of neurons, different type of nerve cells. We're going to look at those pictures here. And these are the different types, and they have to do with kind of the arrangement of the nerve cell body to the axons and the dendrites. So again, you don't really need to know this, just know that they come in various shapes and varieties within. So neural tissue is going to contain these neurons. But we have lots and lots of different arrangements. You see all of these different shapes of nerve cells. But there's some basic landmarks that all nerve cells have in common. All nerve cells have in common a nucleus with a very prominent nucleolus inside of the nucleus. So here's your whole nucleus, and then this is your nucleolus, very large nucleolus. And this is located within what's called the cell body. So the cell body is this whole region here. And then you have, of course, the cell membrane. And here it's called a neurolemma. Okay, special name. Dendrites. Dendrites are the branches that carry information in towards the cell body. And then an action potential, a message we can call it right now, is going to be carried in only one direction from the cell body down the axon to the axon terminals. And so here's another direct diagram showing you how the information passes from cell body, the direction of nerve impulse goes from axon to axon terminals. So in this case, this cell is going to be communicating with actually two other neurons. Okay. What I like about this diagram is it shows you another representation of a nerve cell showing you the cell body. And here it doesn't label them, but these are all the mitochondria, tons and tons of mitochondria inside of the nerve cell. Nerve cells have an incredible energy need, and so they have to have lots of mitochondria to take in glucose and make ATP. You have the huge nucleus, and it's not really showing the nucleolus, but it have a prominent nucleolus. Axon here going down towards the axon terminals. And then we have these special cells here, which we're going to talk about in a minute, and these provide the insulation on the outside of the nerve cells. Then we take this little region here, and it's blown up to show you a closer up view of what one of the axon terminals looks like. At the end, when a nerve impulse comes down from the nerve cell body, it stimulates the release of these chemicals called neurotransmitters. These neurotransmitters are how one nerve cell is going to communicate with another. So they don't actually touch. There's a space here, and it's the chemicals, the neurotransmitters that go across that space. It's called the synaptic cleft. Don't worry about that right now, but it's the chemicals that go across that space that allow one nerve cell to communicate with the next. So they don't actually touch each other. Here's another picture of a dopamine neurotransmitter. So when you take drugs, ladies and gentlemen, drugs that affect your nervous system, interfere with the neurotransmitters that it either blocks them, makes them, inhibits them, or acts like the neurotransmitters, exciting your nervous system. So we'll skip that page. So here is an actual electron photograph or a microscopic photograph of our nerve cells. And the cool part I like about this one is, do you see the nerves? Do you see the neurons themselves? Here's the neuron cells, the cell body of a neuron. Here's another neuron. And then you see all these little small black spots as it has them labeled. These are all the glial cells, all of the support cells. And in your nervous system, the glial cells outnumber your nerve cells 100 to 1. So for every one neuron you guessed it, 100 glial cells. So you have lots and lots of support cells in your nerves, in your nerve cells. Here's a closer up view of a nerve cell, and you can see a cell body. You can see the nucleolus within the nucleus. You see the dendrites up here, multiple dendrites coming off of one cell body, and again, those dendrites are going to be carrying information into the nerve cell body. And dendrite literally means tree. So I think that nerves kind of look like trees, where you have, all the branches at the top, and then typically one tree trunk, and then roots. So these would be the dendrites. This would be the axon, and then the roots down here would be the axon terminals, the end of the axon, with the cell body kind of sitting here. So here we see, again, supporting cells, those glial cells, and then only one axon leaving, which would carry information from the cell body out. Another picture of nerve tissue. Again, do you see the cell body? And then here is an axon. You can see the nucleus right there. Oops, I think I skipped too fast. Here very clearly, can you see the nerve cell and the nerve cell body? Can you see the axon? It's not really showing the dendrites here, though. Not as clear. Again, lots of nerve cells and axons, nerve cell, axon, nerve cell, axon. And then these smaller ones are going to be the support cells. nice up-close view of a nerve cell body. These would be, most likely this is the axon, and then these are all the dendrites, which would be carrying the information in towards the nerve cell. Okay, this picture I've got up here because I wanted you to see what the support cells, just a couple of the types of support cells and what they do. Astrocytes, those are called star cells because, duh, they look like stars. And then we have oligodendrocytes. These secrete an insulation material called myelin. And we're going to talk about demyelination disorders like multiple sclerosis, Parkinson's, and so on, where we have problems with these myelin cells. But you can see that the nerve cells do need support, lots of supporting cells, 100-to-1 ratio, remember. Now, an interesting characteristic about nerve cells cannot regenerate, so they do not go through mitosis. They do not regenerate, okay? So they do not regenerate. So when you have damage to your central nervous system, especially in the central nervous system, those neurons can't regenerate. They can't reproduce themselves. Whereas these cells, the nerve cells, or the neuroglial cells, they can regenerate. So ever heard of a brain tumor? Well, brain tumors are caused by cells of this type and this type reproducing at an abnormal rate. And that's why it's called a glioma. Oma means tumor, and glial of the glial cells. So a glioma is a tumor of a glial cell. In your peripheral nervous system, your nerve cells do have some capability to regenerate, but not very well, not very quickly, very, very slow. So here's a nice up-close view of a neuron and neuroglial cells. These, guess what these are? What's the shape? They look like kind of little stars. These are astrocytes, up-close astrocytes. Okay, more nerve cells. This is a scanning electron micrograph of, here's your nerve cell body. It's from the outside. These are probably dendrites here, and then probably the axon there. So you can see several nerve cell bodies, and this is just showing you kind of how they make this interconnected web with each other, and they communicate with each other. Here's lots and lots. These are pyramidal cells. And so dendrites, I'm sorry, I went too far. So we got dendrites leading in, and then one axon. And then this is using some stains that fluoresce under ultraviolet light to show you all the different types of extensions coming from a nerve cell. And that's going to conclude this lecture. I hope that you were able to get some more information for your notes from this lecture. And if you have some questions, make sure you come in to class and we'll go through your questions, and I'll have some questions for you. Until we see each other in class. Thanks. Bye.